Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I'm joined by Kyle Kinkade from the Monocle Society. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. I mean, all things considered, but it's doing pretty good.
I always like to ask how the guest apocalypse is going.
Um, it has been the one of the single weirdest years, obviously. We have, it's COVID was definitely the thing that, was the first big slap, right? For not just, me and individuals, but understanding how that starts affecting community. And in the tabletop community, um, I think it's really amazing to watch them come together. I think that the we don't have a solution yet that can actually help us change and adapt to the industry. So but watching that, it's still amazing to see people who love tabletop games and love to play games, especially role playing games, actually start to play more and play again because some people have that time, um, and seeing people start to rediscover role playing in general, that's been really fun to watch. My only complaint about the couch apocalypse is that I painted a whole bunch of miniatures for Warhammer. I have no one to play with.
Oh no!
Newly painted minis, and I'm like, fine.
there's,
Maybe I don't do that.
there's only one thing to do. Your army must continue to grow.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, it's always. I mean, I don't know. I love miniatures. Those that's miniatures for a tabletop thing is that's been my thing, right? So I actually got into miniatures heavier first in the tabletop world, but role playing was kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of that. So you know very excited to one day actually get to take a look at that kind of the one of the other pillars of the tabletop industry. That would be a lot of fun.
Well, I mean that's how RPGs started, right? War games, it was an extension of that.
Oh yeah, I think it was chainmail,
Yeah,
right?
yep. That
Yep.
was the
So
evolution.
yeah, that's fun, man. Like I think that would be the watching how RPGs evolved from miniatures. It was like what was that Gary Gygax series, the Dungeon and Dragon series, like the behind the scenes, the history of it. Do you know what I'm
I have not actually seen it, believe it or not.
Oh,
You said that,
yeah.
yeah,
There's
but
a
I'm
there's a
sure
book.
a
There's a
documentary,
book.
right?
You kind of. Well, it's a book series.
Mm.
Though I know that there are some documentaries out there, but the book series is incredible because it talks about like the meta of gaming. You know, when when Gary Gygax was starting to actually make things, and like watching how the meta changed. It's a really great book if you ever want to like learn how to observe patterns in the gaming industry when you're making a product, or if you just want to learn how to just get involved in becoming a game designer. I think that's a critical book. I really do. The book series itself.
Oh, I'll definitely have to check that out. Let's backpedal a little bit for folks that aren't familiar with you, Kyle, and Monocle Society. You want to throw
Oh
us
yeah,
the elevator pitch?
yeah. Sorry. So, well, my name is Kyle Kinkade. I started a company called Monocle Society, and we focus on um, interactive or app-enabled games. So, our first title is called Weave, and Weave is a interactive storytelling platform, which is our nice, kind of the lighter version of a role playing game, essentially. And the idea is that you can create characters and a setting. Create a new season, like a campaign, in under around 10 minutes, and you could be playing within 15. Like if you've never played a role playing game before. It's been a lot of fun making that. And, as we are looking at 2020 and all that, we're going to be releasing a brand new update that is completely free to play, meaning our physical cards that we use for the role-playing game and our dice are actually going to be completely digital. You download the app for free, and we're going to take the original 4 first worlds that we created for Weave, and we're just giving them away for free, meaning here's basically a free role-playing game that you can play completely remotely. You can roll the dice. You can have your game master or storyteller issue a challenge, or issue okay, now you need to make a perception roll, and then you can get that as a notification, click on it, roll the dice, and that information goes back, and there's a history log and everything. We're creating a whole series of tools basically, so to make it very, very easy to manage a whole system, right? So if imagine D&D inside of inside of the iPhone, but it was designed during the iPhone, right? Like that, like what would that have looked like?
So that sounds like a great idea, but how does one have a company and a business off of that model?
So it's a great question. The Weave was originally launched in 2017. We've sold, well over, 5 figures of, copies, especially from our participation with Barnes and Noble, and our interaction with Geek and Sundry. Way back in the day, we actually had a TV show or a show on Twitch with them called Weave Society, and it actually lasted for a full year before Geek and Sundry had to change directions, if I remember correctly. So it's actually been pretty good in our reception. We haven't really had too much to worry about in terms of sales and that. But Monocle Society existed long before Weave. Originally, I have been working with, Monocle Society in general. We worked with a lot of clients. So we've worked with companies like Disney and Nike. We've worked with Starbucks and all that before. And we've gathered a really unique set of talent where we can understand physical objects, for physical interaction, and how that pertains to, physical and digital interacting. So we've built a reputation of being able to do that already from the tech side of the industry. So now we're building that reputation in the board game side.
So Weave has been on my radar for a while, and believe we've done quite a few articles over on the website. Doug is a big fan of the system, and he keeps telling me I have to play, and I actually absolutely want to at some point. Definitely get that in. We were talking about this a little bit before we got started. It's just like there's so many games out there, and so little time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of games, and to be honest, with when you have, how do I put this? When you have a library of cardboard that kind of mocks you for not playing enough of them, you kind of go, oh my God, there's that low hum of stress. And I think a lot of that has to deal with the fact of, the level of friction, and time commitment that you have to actually learn all the rules. You have to, either paint your miniatures, or you have to read a rule book then and try it out for the first time. And, maybe by the 3rd or 4th time, you'll feel like you've gotten it. That level of kind of time commitment is, pretty hard, to be honest. And to spin it back on my side, that's why we have Weave, and that's why we're going free to play and digital, because you can, in the time that it's taken you and me to kind of have, well, one, thank you for letting me rant. I love doing it.
Ran away, my friend, ran away.
But in that time, that from the beginning of the show to now, we already could have created a full, like, a character with a couple of other people, and we could have been playing, we could have been in a story at this point. And I'm saying not just, where everyone has a character created, before the game starts. I mean, go from everybody to go download Weave and create an account. And within that next 10 to 15 minutes, they'll have characters. That is a time commitment that is microscopic compared to the time commitment for most other games.
How many times have you got? I'm sure you must have done this a bunch of times where you, and it seems like it would be a big part of the play testing from everything you said, is just gathering people together that haven't played RPGs and going, here's the stuff, do the thing.
A lot, actually. We spent a lot of time working with people who have wanted to play board games, but for one reason or another, they're like, I haven't really been able to get into it. I'd love to learn how to play more, but and we kind of built this very unique usability study way early on in around 2016, late 2016, early 2017, where we have a bunch of people who genuinely want to play board games, but if you talk, if you're spending 20 minutes trying to explain the rules, you can automatically see their eyes glaze over. And we've done a lot of like asking, like, what are you feeling right now? Why, like, how does that, why did that just make you happy? And we get a lot of that feedback in the answers. And it's not always them testing our stuff too. It's actually testing role-playing games. One of the things that I remember when we were starting out with Weave was getting a bunch of the easiest to learn games or the least nerdy versions of role-playing games. Things that people don't automatically, assign tropes to, right? If you say Dungeons and Dragons, and they're like, oh, you know that THACO isn't going to be in their vocabulary anytime soon. So, but you find that out and you kind of just let them look at it. And one of the things we found out early on was when you said, do you want to play a role-playing game? They're like, what was that again? And then you explain it to it and you're like, oh, the pen and the paper thing. Yeah, that's never been for me. One of the things that you get, the next question that we would ask is totally fair. What about a storytelling game? And they go, oh, well, what's that? And I'm like, So we learned early on that we needed to approach that market first, because getting more players into this game, helps us create a more diverse culture, especially when we are bringing new players in, no matter where they're coming from. I think that's been a pretty awesome thing to see, to actually have people go like, I've always wanted to play a game like this, but I don't, I didn't really know where to start. And then for them to go, oh my God, I get it. That's just been so cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, like, gatekeepers aside, I've seen people gatekeep themselves out of this hobby just because they're like, oh, that's for really smart people and I couldn't play that, and they create like all these artificial barriers for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they create the artificial barriers because of things that they've already experienced. When someone, the person who designed the cards and the original logo with me on this, but she 100%, it's her design. I can't take that away from her. When I asked, her, I was like, okay, So how do we want to design Weave? What are the cool things that we wanted to, visually look like? One of the things we landed on was what became the phrase, what happens if we made a role-playing game in the year 2020? Like, what would that look like in something like Stranger Things, right? So if all the Stranger Things kids were like, hey kids, here's a role-playing game in the year 2020, they'd be like, what? Like, what would that have looked like, right? Mm-hmm. But she designed it, it started as that, and her designs turned into was, what's the kind of role-playing game that I would have wanted to design or wanted to have played when I was a girl, right? Like, what would have actually been, the thing that I would have wanted to have seen. And I think that's pretty awesome, because that right there, that sent, for me, the, hey, look, any tropes that you have about, Cheetos in mom's basement, just, get that out of your head. And that was a very nerdy, weird time. But, there was a lot of, there are a lot of negative tropes, around it. So I think getting people, to change their mind about it at the casual level, that's something that just gets me excited every day.
I'm going to jump into the chat. We got a couple questions. Brian wants to know, on the theme of tech plus tabletop RPG, do you think we'll see any integration of AR to replicate minis terrain at a shared table?
Who said that?
Brian in our chat. Brian Smith.
Yeah.
You can say as little as much as you want. We were talking about this a little bit before we went live. Some of it is off the record. But I will say, we've seen Kickstarters for people doing AR. So it's out there. And people are trying to incorporate it.
I'm trying to think. I mean, will we see it? Yes. Right. I'm not so much talking about anything that, I have planned for Weave. But I think for me, the question that we're asking is, like, do we see this happening? What we're really asking ourselves a lot of the time, or secondarily internally in our heads, is, what would that look like? Right. And when you think of what would that look like, sometimes you could be like, geez, how could that possibly be, useful? If, that could just feel like it could feel like a total gimmick, something that is like, oh, okay, this is cool, I guess, yay, sparkles, like, yeah, you could see that. But what if, bear with me now, when we introduce a technology, it's because we actually want to solve something. What if when we use technology, we're not using it because we want to get, a quick turnaround buck, but because we can actually make it a core component of the experience? And I think when you treat augmented reality like a tool, when you treat it like, hey, here's a way for you to storytell as a game master or as a player that is actually helpful, to the point where you're like, oh my God, I wish I've had this for years. If we can do that, that's the real question, right? Is, will it be there? Absolutely. But what will that look like? And what will it take for it to become the thing that people get excited for? And I think it will take treating, for the tabletop games especially, it will take treating tabletop with respect, to adding it as a first-class game component, not as a replacement.
So Eric wants to know, this is pretty cool looking, though getting people going fast as possible, how would you go about session zero with Weave as they become so popular these days?
Wait, what was the thank you, by the way. What was the last part of the question?
Basically, how do you, with the games, you're getting into the game so rapidly, how would you incorporate a session zero?
That is a really, really good question. Um, Session zero for us is, I know the answer,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to figure out how to say it.
Do you mind, as someone who's just kind of like observed the game, if I give my thoughts on it real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
To me, this kind of game, your part of your session zero for a game like Weave is you build the game together with all the players and the person that's technically running the game. A lot of
Hmm.
times, or you can if you're doing like this is we're gonna play real fast and start right now from scratch. You would literally part of setting up the game is the session zero. Now there might be some other things you want to incorporate as far as social contract elements, which is a little bit different than a session zero, but still like where you go, hey, we definitely don't want to see this kind of stuff in the game, or if we're going to use some kind of X card or something like that, or safety
Yeah,
tools, that would be a different conversation. But I feel like the game itself almost is the session zero.
it is. I think part of the game itself is the session zero, but I think there's a way we can make that session zero pretty damn effortless, right? So if we can, if one of the things that we've been able to say is like, I can walk up and teach you how to play Weave, create a character in 5 to 10 minutes, and you're good to go, right? That's pretty cool. You still have to understand Weave. So the thing that we're going to be focusing on, as we build it out, we've created and added so many more features now to Weave, and its public beta is actually available on Weave.game right now. So if you're on iOS or Android, go ahead and download Weave and check it out. We do almost weekly updates for the public beta right now. But one of the new tools that we have is polishing that user experience, to the point where it is the smoothest possible experience. And one of the critical parts of that, I think, is the onboarding of how players can like learn. That 3 to 5 minute kind of situation, that could be something that we can provide inside of Weave when you first load the app. And if you are getting invited, maybe we can actually make it look a little bit different. So that way, you can understand like, oh, I'm just wanting to learn, or I just got invited, right? That is that experience, that session zero, I think is that 5 to 10 minute experience. And while the game is definitely session zero, we can make that session zero end quicker if we provide that next level experience, which is something I'm very interested in providing.
Does Weave incorporate any safety tools into it by default?
When you say safety tools, what do you mean by that?
Like the X card. I mean, there's a lot of different systems just for like if the content is going in a direction that a player is uncomfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they one of the things I wanted to do when we were Monocle Society team was designing Weave, was I really didn't like the idea of min-maxing. I didn't like the idea of someone being able to effectively control the storytelling experience, or be able to have an unnecessary amount of control should they choose to. So Weave was designed, it's a leveling system, in the update since, which came out last year, the leveling system for us, that was designed to be horizontal. The reason why that's important is because when you have people who are playing a game of any role-playing game, they can be total trolls, right? They can go in a direction where they don't want to be, where you don't want it to go. And there are two different ways to handle that. One is the lore route, or the technical route, being like, okay, cool, let's do some dice math, and watch your number get hurt, so maybe you can chill out for a second. But the other side of it is also how do you get out of that storytelling hole? When you have a vertical character, right, which means like, level 1 through 10, where the stats just get better. The problem with that is there's not a lot of opportunity for a beginner storyteller to kind of latch onto that character sheet to be like, how can I navigate? How can I, provide a new challenge or a new direction with this character that I'm experiencing as a troll? Whereas if you design horizontally, meaning that you add more depth to the character, more lore and rich history and all of that, but that comes tied with its own benefits. Then you can then use that as a storyteller. So here's a great example. If someone's gonna try and kick down a door inside of Weave, I would use the enticement, against one of the flaws that they have. So then you can find a narrative reason by looking at a character sheet and being like, oh, wait a minute, they're they're always distracted by a shiny thing, and be like, so you were going to do that door kicking thing that I don't know how to storytell for because I'm brand new at this, but you saw something shiny, and this says that screws you over. So let's talk about that. You have that kind of out at the character level. So that's kind of how we started, solving it at the character level. Then at the storyteller level, you have the plot twist. At any point in time, in Weave, you can just scan a new card, and inside of the deck of cards of the 22 cards inside of Weave lies the world that you chose to play. So if you wanted to play a fantasy or a sci-fi, you would scan the same cards, but depending on the world that you're in, you would get different results. And inside of those cards, you have enemies, locations, plot twists, NPC characters. You have plenty of options. And when you load them up, a lot of them have, a 280 character blurb of information. And the idea is that if you have multiple sets of information from a psychological level, you're able to actually start drawing conclusions. It's actually how people who are really into conspiracy theories, it's how their brains work. Is you give them like 3 pieces of information, and they're like, aha, and all the things start linking. So you play the game, dynamically. You play the game, by constantly piecing things together and just, going with the flow. And I find that at first, while people might find that, experience a bit daunting, it's actually, the lazy GM way, right? And it's the way that, we all ultimately kind of start going into as we become, we play more and more storytelling games. We go, yeah, look, I'm going to wing this for the next hour.
So
let's have fun with that.
Each card is basically the length of a tweet.
Each card has around, depending on the play set, you can have about 10 qualities inside of it, right? So a couple backstories for the characters, a couple plot twists for the storytellers, and inside of each one of those qualities is 280 characters. So you're basically reading a tweet, and that gives you the description of what it is, right? So if I was a character and I had the ability to chickomancy, the ability to summon chickens, and if I had that, then I would be like, cool, I'm going to write a really funny blurb about it that kind of makes it very easy, right? And then when you tap on the side of the quality in the app, it shows you how it works, so your mechanics, any triggers, or any other backstory behind it. So it's what became originally just 280 characters become a very useful and versatile tool inside the app to give you the bare information. And that's the point, is that we start out, when we design the app, presenting the most narrative based information first to the storyteller and the players, for that matter, because you're playing a storytelling game. You want to latch on to that, right? You want to be able to look at it and be like, ha, that's a good name. Oh, that's right, I can do this crazy thing. But you want to see that narrative, throughout the entire user interface.
So how did you come up with 280 characters?
I felt like it.
Okay. I didn't know if there was some a lot of research and testing or science, or let me make it just slightly longer than a tweet.
I had a shoot from the hip moment, basically, where we're trying to be like, okay, we need to present this user interface. We need to present this data so it can be consumed really quickly, right? And so it's not just a paragraph of qualities strung together, that it's just something where you can just read and move on. And obviously Twitter, with its 280 characters. And my theory was, I bet you that because there are so many Twitter apps, originally, and there's so many different ways that tweets can look because of that nature. I bet you a lot of people probably have already looked into this problem for UI design. Sure enough, they have. So I was like, yes, let's go in the direction where everyone's gone.
Someone's notifications are blowing up.
I know. Wow. Well, you know what?
It happens, man.
So yeah, no, it's fine. It's actually entertainingly enough right now. It's my wife who got she's bored upstairs, so she lets go, hey in text message.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to explain to her. Actually, I'm just going to show her this video and just let her feel this moment. So if you give me the next 5 seconds, hey babe. Yeah. Okay, I think we're done here.
So the Mighty Hob has a question. Technology changes so fast. A big concern for me about having an RPG totally digital is that in 5 to 15 years, the software no longer works on the hardware and no longer updated by the creators.
Yeah, that would suck. I mean, let's be honest. It's a problem that's existed, in video games. Absolutely. That's been a problem. We conserving video games, and as a video game historian kind of role that people have started to adopt for themselves is hard. And you can't always guarantee that a game that was made in 97 is going to work on any machine at any point anyways, and emulators don't promise crap. So they're right, that this is an issue, and it's a real concern. Unless you think about design in game design, tabletop game design first. So if you design the game where it can actually be played in full physical glory, right? If it's like, okay, well, the app no longer works, what does that look like? No problem. Like, you should be able to, if you designed it correctly and you obeyed the rules of what is a tabletop game, the core ideals of it, you should be able to just go, yeah, sorry about that, here's an entirely offline version. Should that day come. That is not how I like to think about it. Considering that I have Weave tattooed on my arm, I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. Because the moment that it doesn't go anywhere soon, people are going to be like, hey, isn't that? You're like, yeah. And I don't want to be that guy. So I'm pretty darn committed to this.
So Eric wants to know, is there a plan to create a fully digital version where the cards are purchased digitally instead of physically? You actually mentioned about giving that away, actually.
So the digital version where you purchase the cards and dice, I've absolutely considered that. And I decided, what would be really cool? If we just gave the first 4 worlds that we originally created for Weave, we spruce them up and we give them away for free, because the cards and dice are free in the app. And that's what we did. We are releasing the newest version of Weave in 2020, which, was going relatively swimmingly, and until February existed in the year 2020 when you were in Seattle. So, but the newest version of Weave gives you the cards and dice digitally for free. You can go download the beta right now, weave.beta, or just monoclesociety.com. We're just redirecting it over to weave.beta for now. You can go download it for iOS and Android, and you can be playing the latest version. And we actually have more features that are coming out, and the one that we're working on getting out right now, has been probably what I think is one of the biggest technical solutions, which has been AR side. But we're also working on getting the encounters feature so that we can actually manage an encounter in all your initiatives. That's coming out in definitely the next update. So, we're adding a lot of features to it. So if you wanted to take a look at, what a completely free-to-play role-playing game where they're just like, here you go, try the first 4 worlds free, and try out some of the tools that we're going to be adding to our Weave Plus subscription service, which will be coming out for the release of this update. Or if you want to see how it interacts with our brand new storyteller screen, where, conveniently I have right here. This is a devious little device. There's NFC technology here, so you can actually tap your phone to it. Wait for it. Let me just go ahead and try this right now. There's a little notification, so I tap on that, and it's actually going to load my latest version of whatever campaign I was playing at the time. So that means you can literally unlock your phone and load your character sheet, and the storyteller can load the entire storyteller tools in seconds. It's literally the fastest load time for getting back into a session that I've ever seen. That's, to do it in under 60 seconds is a pretty ridiculous situation. Then on top of that, when you open up the screen, you literally just see the last card, the Magician. And this is actually, for people who played the physical version of Weave, the physical cards, which I have right here, they're all trackable inside of augmented reality. So cards look like this, and they're all scannable by your phones. This is the same thing. Even the front of this is trackable in 3D space. And then, this panel, and this panel are all separately trackable in 3D space, meaning we can do, like, in the future, really cool things where, as we open up like this, we can actually detect those planes with the phone or with any head-mounted AR device on your face, and do some really cool AR effects. So that's kind of the direction that we're going in, is to be able to have all that really cool stuff available for people, but to make it free to try out.
So Joe wants to know, is there any Stargate stuff in Weave?
Any what?
Stargate?
So no. What we are doing is we are making our own content. We do have some licenses that we're working on that we can happily talk about later at a next time. Right now, what we've been really focusing on is going, hey, let's just make the best version of Weave possible. And then once we've done that, let's make a whole lot of content, both original and licensed content. And that is the direction it will be going.
Nice. So does that mean, because I get, my impression was maybe that it was a generic system. So is that wrong? Like, you have your set worlds that you guys that people could purchase before, but you're going to be giving away, and Like to play Weave, you're gonna need to play in one of those.
Yeah, so you do. It's a full role playing game, right? It's not where you can be like, well, let's just play in this universe. I mean, you can, but you would basically be creating your own modules at that point, which is another thing that we'll be looking at. But the thing that is exciting about it is that in order for us to create the best kind of world creation, right, we really want to own how that content is structured inside the app. We're not doing it just so we can have generic worlds. We're doing it so we can actually have a content creation tool. And some of the brands that we've talked to, and some of the brands that we've worked with, it's content that we know, right? I could say a name and they'll be like, oh no, yeah, I can see how that would work. It's in there, right? So it's kind of like how Dungeons and Dragons had the Rick and Morty edition, right? It's not that much different.
So Brian wants to know: is there any way to integrate Weave into Zoom or any other video conferencing tools? Lots of players in the digital realm already.
Wouldn't that be cool? I think there could be a lot of cool things to do with video and audio integration inside of a role-playing game. Wouldn't that be awesome if a role-playing game had that designed in mind? What would that look like?
To be honest with you, like one of the cool things that I saw was, I think it was in Cipher System when I was reading through that book, and it was like the first time I've seen online play mentioned in an RPG. I don't know that they were the first one to do it. I just know that's the first place that I saw it.
It's cool, right? I remember seeing that and being like, hey,
the world has changed.
Yeah, but more than that, right? Is you need to find the people who can start to acknowledge that the world has changed. That's how you get people thinking differently and growing the industry, is by someone going, hey, online play, let's talk about that, in a fully printed book. That the first person to do that gets it pretty well.
Yeah. So Doug wants to know, could you explain what the play sets are and how they're used to create a Weave game?
Yeah, so a playset inside of Weave is our, kind of like a sliver of a fully formed universe, right? So meaning that in the future there will be multiple playsets that all take place in the same universe. A playset has, for the storyteller, 3 main qualities that you scan in or that you derive from the cards themselves, that lets you create the first episode or any episode in your season, in your campaign that you create with your friends. These 3 qualities for every episode is a theme, a location, and a featured character. So let's go through that. The theme is the idea that, hey, let's say you're playing the 80s kids adventure playset, Gloomies, and one of it is like, hey, aliens have invaded secretly, and it's up to your ragtag bicycles to ride out there and do something how to stop them, right? Like that could be a theme. I am brutalizing, by the way, an actual theme from one of my own plays, from one of the play sets we've created. So I'm sure the author is going to brutalize me later. But that gives you an immediate direction of like, what is the theme of tonight's episode, right? Which we all are very familiar with from television. We get that more innately at times. Then the second one is location, which is, you would think that it would mean that it's your starting location, but it could also be the ending location. Maybe the theme ties into the alien invasion because that's where they landed and you need to find that location and get to it. Or it could mean that, you know, you start in this location and that's when you first see the aliens come in, right? You have events that happen. Then you have to tie those events to the world that you're inside of. So you give it a you know, physical location. And then you want to make sure that there are characters that aren't characters or players, right? You want to make sure that there's at least one character that a storyteller can use to interact. And that is your featured character. A featured character, or featuring, is, it could be a boss character, and it was only a boss character in the first couple of versions of Weave. In 2020 version of Weave, it is either a boss character or an enemy or an NPC, right? So a non-player character. So that means it's no longer that there automatically is an enemy that you have to defeat. You can still pull in those enemies, but now it means that every episode, you know that there is at least one character that the storyteller can have access to, that they can use to interact with the players. And as you are playing Weave, you can add in more characters, enemies, NPCs, or bosses. And as a storyteller, you can add in more locations, and you can add in assets. Give someone an axe, or have them find a silver coin that might be a clue. You can do these things thematically. But the very, very first core connection is, how I talked about the more connections that you have, conspiracy theory mindset. 3 is a good minimum number for people to go, okay, there's an event, there's a place in which it takes place, and there's probably some person who's part of that event. I can somehow tie this together. And the more cards and more qualities that you add to that timeline during that episode, it helps you solidify the story that, towards the end, you're very confident the direction in. But look, like 40 minutes ago, you were just starting to explore.
So at first, when you mentioned the featured character, I was like, that sounds an awful lot like a GM player character. But your definition of it really kind of changed that, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because oftentimes I've seen where GMs will create their own character because they want to play the game, but the feature character isn't there to play the game. The feature character is there to interact with the players in the game.
Yep, exactly. Now, you can still play as that character. They'll still have a character sheet. And all of the bosses and enemies that we've had in earlier versions of Weave, it was just a paragraph where it's like, you can figure it out, let's see where it goes. And now, as we have a 2020 version, 2019 gave us character sheets for bosses and enemies and NPCs. Now we have really started to lean more into that. And the reason why that's important is now there is 2 things that we have in that, is that people who want to play the game, they want to play as a character, right? Yes, that is the role of a storyteller. Your job is to explain. Your job is also to role play with them and to play as a character, many characters, in fact. So let's find a way to make that a very fun part of the game. And by giving each enemy and character, not only character sheets, which is, that's not the innovation, right? But actually, giving people the game design where they can figure out, oh, if I, this character thematically reads as this, but it's mechanically designed in that same way, so I can play this, the play style of this character plays a bit differently than the other ones. Trying to get that experience to new players as soon as possible so they can play characters differently as a storyteller. How quickly can we introduce that concept? I'm really happy that we got that concept working pretty quickly. I think that's been really, really great to watch when people who are just starting to learn how to role play and storytell when they are able to start making those connections, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I can play this. I'm not, just a glorified stenographer. I also know what's going on, and I can have a little effect in it, making people feel comfortable in that scenario. That's been a lot of fun.
You've mentioned there are 4 Weave worlds, or games essentially now.
Currently available, yes.
Yeah, what are they?
Yeah, so the 4 Weave worlds are Solar Age, which is a kind of a Buck Rogers 1950s type world. Plays a lot like Guardians of the Galaxy. And these aren't generic, by the way. I mean, they might be viewed as generic, but if we were to print these out, they would be around 160 pages for us to print. So these are pretty, it's a good amount of text. The other world that, was actually the very first one was called Zorta, which was a cyberpunk world that takes place in Venezuela on top of a living mountain. Sean Richer, who has done a lot of amazing stuff in the past, worked on it. And it's a really, really cool world. It definitely plays like a Radiohead song in terms of the fact that, like, man, you gotta be, really diving into this world head first to kind of, get into that character. But once you're in that character, there's a lot there. And then we have the world that I am very happy with, which is Goblins Are Jerks. And Goblins Are Jerks is a fantasy system a fantasy playset that I worked on with Ryan Shapples, who is just, God, he's such a great writer. He's just really great at his job, and he worked with Harebrained Schemes afterwards. That was such a fun world. That was our take on the fantasy tropes, where everybody plays as a goblin. And I just love the idea that you get to, as a goblin, attack heroes. Or you're not going to win, but you can screw up their day. Or the situations that what are the kind of stupid situations that goblins would get snared up in, and there are a lot. There's a lot of tinkering. There's a lot of portals and magic. There are at least 30 references to David Bowie in one card because I got bored one night. And it's the owl card. Read it. See if you can find how many David Bowie quotes or references to songs I put into that single card. It's ridiculous. It was just a blast to play, and it's been the one that I've really loved playing the most. But the one that has been played the most is the 4th one, which is Gloomies. And Gloomies is just awesome. It's it was initially done by Matt Youngmark, and there's a new version where Tristan Morris and Renee Rhodes worked on as well. And the whole idea behind it is that it's an 80s kids adventure, right? But the mystery behind the 80s kids adventure, and kind of why does it always feel that they're stuck perpetually in 80s kids adventure tropes? Why does that keep happening when it's so very blatant? Like, all of that's part of the mystery of Gloomies. And the fact that we call it Gloomies, because what do you want from us?
Yeah.
That world is just great. A lot of fun references and just internet humor and memes are actually scattered throughout that one. We have some other play sets that we worked on before. Click, which is a high school comedy one. That one's coming back, but that was one of the very, very first ones. And we wanted to make sure that as we've went from a very bare bones role-playing game to a sophisticated one that still has that ease of use, We've had to pull some of our play sets and update them and come back. The good news is, we're not going to have to do another major update of Weave for a while. So when they come back, they'll be there to stay.
Nice. Do you have any new play sets that you're working? I'm sure you do. That you're willing to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Let's do this. One of them is called Chicken Dungeon. It is a playset that's tied to the Goblins Are Jerks universe. And it's a dungeon runner. And there's a lot of chickens and a lot of really dumb things to do when you're running inside of a dungeon. That one is it's ridiculous. It's just full of puns. And basically I was like, okay, I love dungeon diving and dungeon delving, but what if I poured like all the nacho cheese on it? And was like, yeah, that's basically what I did with Chicken Dungeon. It's very stupid, but I love it. There is another one that we're soon, but there's one that we're working on where, oh my gosh, I can't wait. It's going to be great. But the one that I am excited for that I can also talk about, we kind of teased it at one point, was a playset called Spellcrackers. And Spellcrackers it's a heist playset, but with magic and stuff. So it's, okay, Harry Potter, but what if George Clooney? And it's great. It's fantastic. Heist movies are amazingly formulaic, which makes them fantastic to role play in.
So, based on a couple of things you said, Eric has a really good question. I noticed a comedic theme in several of the mentioned playsets. Is that intentional and intended to be the norm, or is that just a few fun examples, but you have more serious ones as well?
Yeah. Yes and no. So are there a few serious ones? Absolutely. And the more serious we get, the more we have to really start crafting, right? And, that might mean mechanical changes to the game that can only exist for that one world, right? If we want to talk about expandability and customization and making Weave feel like a completely different game, custom mechanics for playsets will inevitably have to happen. So are those in the works? Yes. However, the other thing is we are creating these fun worlds in the beginning, not because that's our only mode of operation. But I will tell you, it is the primary mode of operation for me. Like, absolutely primary mode. I am just nothing but ridiculous. And just, we have Muppets in our office, like full-blown Muppets. The Muppets aren't here right now. They're in quarantine in the office. But, we just attack each other with Muppets. I'll send photos. It's ridiculous. But we do that for a reason. And the reason is that when you are learning how to play a role-playing game, when you're learning how to play what is basically to most people is a textbook, textbook the game, I think has been referenced before. You want to reduce the amount of anxiety. You want to get people into that happier mode as soon as possible, because when you have dopamine coursing through your brain because it's something that's, it's a good memory, you're more likely to remember. That's pretty standard, in understanding user experience. So we are creating a good set of, kind of role-playing games that, we want as our brand to kind of explore the wonder and the enjoyment of role-playing. But are there more serious titles? Absolutely. You know, Nintendo Switch has Dark Souls.
That makes a lot of sense, and that is definitely an interesting way of looking at it. It's like, hey, if we want to bring more new people into this, what is a fun way to do it? What is an easy way to do it? And lifting those barriers where they don't have to worry about being serious or really deep, but just be a goblin who's a jerk trying to run through a dungeon full of chickens.
Through a dungeon full, there is going to be a Chickomancer ability update as a goblin. You will be able to summon chickens in a dungeon and have them fight for you. If they get turned on fire, there is literally a trigger for that. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, if you told someone, okay, we're going to play a role-playing game. All right, who am I playing from the Lord of the Rings? No, bro. You're playing a goblin who can summon chickens. Let's do this. Like that, you are going to get so many more people interested.
That sounds great. So we're at that time where it's over an hour, so it's time to head out. Final words before we go?
No, I think I've said too much.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Kyle. I appreciate you chatting with us and hanging out. And for everyone else, until next time, stay nerdy.
See you later.